My name is Amata, and in this Red Gaming Tech video I am here with the latest from the tech world in the last 24 or so hours. Just for your FYI, my friends, Paul currently does have a video on the way to you, so there is also going to be a Paul video for you, but I have some news before that comes. However, what do I have for you? Well, got a couple of Intel pieces to kick things off with. We have a good news, bad news situation, unfortunately, as we have yet another Intel platform vulnerability, which lets malware do some stuff you'd rather it not do. But then on the good news front, we have Intel using its graphics silicon to help get rid of stubborn malware. And then we're going to move on to some iPhoneX news, which basically shows the huge impact that Apple has on the mobile industry. So, as I said, we're going to start with Intel and the platform vulnerability. Yes, it seems the tale of woe continues, and well, we have an interesting article, from Bleeping Computer, which details the CVE-2017-5703 vulnerability. I know, just rolls off the tongue, basically. But what this did was let malware erase your motherboard, UEFI, BIOS, or render the EEPROM chip, storing it read-only forever, basically meaning that no BIOS updates for you, and exploited vulnerabilities in Intel's implementation of the serial peripheral interface on its platforms. Now, unfortunately, this vulnerability, does affect all Intel processors dating all the way back to Broadwell. So, you know, not exactly a small sample size there. But, thankfully, they have passed on fixes to OEM partners to release as BIOS updates. Now, we have Lenovo to thank for the awareness of this, and they deployed BIOS updates for vulnerable products, while also providing some details on what this vulnerability actually was. And they described the vulnerability as, quote, the configuration of the system firmware device SPI flash could allow an attacker to block BIOS UEFI updates, or to selectively erase or corrupt portions of the firmware. This would most likely result in a visible malfunction, but could in rare circumstances result in arbitrary code execution. Now, thankfully, Intel has not witnessed this outside in the wild. They said they have discovered the vulnerability internally, and thankfully haven't noticed any applications of it by actual human beings outside of Intel. And they did say, quote, issue is root caused and the mitigation is known and available. To Intel's knowledge, the issue has not been seen externally. So, it does seem that, while this is not exactly brilliant, this is a thing that exists, it seems Intel managed to catch it internally and issue the updates, which is pretty damn good, because this vulnerability sounds pretty terrible, to be honest, and the fact that it has such a sweeping vulnerability effect, I guess you could say, going all the way back to Broadwell, as I already said, is just, as I said, awful, but thankfully they were much faster on the money on this one than they were with Spectre and Meltdown, let's just say that. So, for those of you who don't use Lenovo, Intel has released updates, and again, PC and motherboard vendors are expected to deploy these as either firmware patches or again BIOS/UEFI updates. So, do keep your eyes peeled for that, but it does seem that fixes have already been deployed. So, thankfully, no panic needed. But good guy Lenovo, I guess, for publicising this and making it known. So, let's move on to some good news from Intel. So, as well as the release that I just discussed, Intel have also announced some new security features, including one that will utilise their graphics hardware to help find and eliminate stubborn malware. Now, obviously, I know what some of you are thinking, it's like, oh, yeah, but I always do my Scamware antivirus or my anti-malware software, whatever. But as you probably know, there are some pretty nefarious viruses and malware out there that avoid these by avoiding writing anything to your hard drive at all. They can be found in the memory, can impact performance, and just generally be a pain in the butt to get rid of. Now, basically, Intel are hoping to help alleviate this with GPU-based memory scanning, and this particular feature is going to be called Advanced Memory Scanning, and is basically meant to rid you of the CPU performance penalty that you might find with a virus scan. Obviously, if you're scanning with your malware, anti-malware software, or whatever it happens to be, you're not really going to be doing much else other than maybe watching YouTube videos or Twitch or whatever, because, you know, the CPU is going to be like, yep, okay, I'm busy with this for a while, don't bother me, basically. So this is, according to Intel, up to 20% CPU load just for scanning. So that's not exactly small change, especially if you have a power-hungry, or should I say spec-hungry game. Now, basically, as you might guess, Intel are putting some of this workload onto their integrated GPUs, and basically they're saying that by getting the GPU to search for system memory for any malware signatures, that will reduce the load on the CPU to just 2%, which basically means you can actually do other stuff that might be slightly demanding while you're doing a virus scan. Now this is only going to be something that will be used by the CPU, and of course the integrated graphics silicon is not going to suddenly be using your graphics card for this, because obviously the processor has full access to system RAM, which is something your GPU just flat out doesn't have. Now at the moment we don't know what's going to be happening with, say, laptops and low-end desktops, something that might have an integrated GPU by default, or whether it's even going to be usable for those with discrete graphics cards. But it is still a pretty neat feature, even if there is a little bit of a question mark hanging over that section of the market. It's still pretty cool. Now, it's pretty clear, at least partially, why they've done this, because people's faith in them as a company, I think, has definitely been shaken a lot by Spectre and Meltdown, and how they handled it, and how the patches were pulled multiple times, and then obviously the performance issues and all this other stuff. Intel's definitely taken a hit when it comes to people's faith in them, and obviously the security of, your PC, your data, all of that important stuff, which obviously is very, very important to people, increasingly so in this increasingly digital scape. So I think at least partially this is a kind of like a way to show, like, hey guys, yeah, honest, we're trying to take your security seriously. Here's this cool thing that will help you get rid of malware and stuff. Like, I'm not saying that's the only reason they did it, but I definitely think that was part of the decision-making process. That might just be being cynical, but I definitely think it played a part. Now, they also have something else for us that is actually separate to this, which is basically a security feature which uses cloud computing and machine learning to figure out if your PC is under attack, and whether or not the attack is actually well known to the system, is actually going to be incorporated into Windows Defender, the thing that most people don't even have turned on, but hey ho. It is going to be implemented into that later this month, and is going to use the advanced platform telemetry, and it's going to take diagnostic data and use machine learning to see if there are any patterns that seem strange, then flag up any oddities, and maybe even just discover new malware or systems attacks before they're known or understood. Now, Intel, again thinking of all those data and faith concerns that I just discussed, has stressed that data is anonymous and generalized, so there's no danger in breach of data from the cloud keeping an eye on your CPU. So, pretty cool stuff, I will say. Not exactly making up for Spectre and Meltdown, but it doesn't hurt, and I definitely appreciate the effort made, because it is a little bit irritating that when you basically do a virus scan, that, goodbye to anything else you were doing at the time, essentially. So let's move on to our final item for today, which, as I said, is regarding the iPhoneX. Now, this news comes to us thanks to an interesting study done by Counterpoint Research, and they looked at Apple overall, but what I want to kind of focus on here is the iPhoneX. Well, overall, Apple did gain 1% of profit in the smartphone market, but regarding the iPhoneX, the rather expensive flagship phone, of course it is $999, has not sold as much as Apple have expected, and obviously their forecasts and all of that, I've discussed this multiple times, but despite the fact that it has performed under expectations, it still made 5 times the profit of the aggregate profit of nearly 600 Android device makers in the last quarter of 2017. So, to put that in smoother terms, it accounted for 35% of global smartphone profits, despite the fact that it sold less than expected. Now, undoubtedly, some of that is to do with the fact that it is so expensive, but that's not the only factor here, clearly. Now, I do have a bit of a statement here from this study, which reads, quote, "The share of iPhone X is likely to grow as it advances further into its life cycle. Additionally, the longer shelf life of all iPhones ensured that Apple still has 8 out of top 10 smartphones, including its 3-year models, generating the most profits compared to current competing smartphones from other OEMs." Now, as kind of was just hinted by that statement there, the popularity obviously is not just limited to the X. This is Apple and the iPhone we're talking about here. Unsurprisingly, we also saw the iPhone 8 and iPhone 8 Plus occupying the second and third spot respectively. So basically, Apple were ruling the top 3 in this particular study. So overall, Apple grabs 86% of smartphone profits, and again, the iPhone X grabbed 35% just by itself, but basically Apple were just like, yep, I'll have that, I'll have all the smartphone profits, thank you very much. And obviously, Android wasn't exactly crying in the corner counting its coppers or anything, but Apple made an insane amount of money. Several Scrooge McDuck-sized swimming pools, I'd say, if you want to use the official measurement. Unsurprisingly as well, Counterpoint are also saying that the iPhoneX is only going to continue to do well and to grow. Now, Counterpoint did also predict that we're going to be seeing some more fierce competition from the other side of the market, that being, of course, Android devices, but they have said this a couple of years in a row, and it has yet to materialise, as Apple just do have an insane grip on the majority of the smartphone market, despite the fact that we have seen an increase in cost, and obviously a lot of people haven't been able to afford the X due to that. It is still an insane amount of money, and it is, again, still Apple we're talking about, so yeah. They're still making basically all the money in the world despite that. So let me know what your thoughts are on everything discussed here, guys. As I said, there is going to be a second video for you today from Paul, so to keep your eyes peeled out for that. Hopefully it'll be with me soon for me to edit, so yeah, not to get too much inside baseball there, but it is on its way to you. So thanks for watching, guys. Bye-bye.